Early on during embryonic development, we start to get cell differentiation and cell specialization, and we get what are called extraembryonic membranes. And so these are the membranes that actually do not make up the embryo. We start out as an embryonic disc, or actually there's an inner cell mass first, and that embryonic disc then differentiates into the epiblast and the hypoblast. So we have the embryonic disc, we have the epiblast, and you'll notice that this is blue, and this is going to form part of the amnion, or it's actually going to form the amnion. So the amnion is the amniotic membrane that encloses the developing embryo in an aquatic environment. So when you hear this word, you know, that is the membrane that if they're trying to induce labor, they might actually cut it, and your water, that bag of water breaks, and then water comes out. And generally that will begin to induce labor. This amnion, also sometimes you hear it in terms of amniocentesis, which is where they actually puncture the mother's belly with a needle, and they go through the amnion and they get some cells out of the amniotic fluid. And that those cells in the amniotic fluid contain fetal cells, and then they can do a karyotype on those chromosomes. So when we look at the amnion, this is the fluid-filled sac in which early embryonic development occurs. And that is derived from the epiblast. Epiblast would be like upon, above, right? So the other one is the hypoblast. And the hypoblast is going to become the yolk sac. So it is generally yellow. That yolk sac contains nutrients for the early embryo, but it's also going to become the umbilical cord. So it's extraembryonic because the umbilical cord is of the embryo, but it's not going to make up the embryo's body because we're going to cut it after birth. So this is umbilical cord, umbilical cord, umbilical cord. Yeah, okay. So that would be the, I did not spell that right. Umbilical cord comes umbilicus, the umbilical, what a weird name, umbilical cord. Okay. So we have a couple of other ones. We have the chorion, which is going to be that part of the embryonic tissue that is going to become the fetal part of the placenta. So the chorion, this becomes the fetal part of the placenta. Okay. We have one more, the Elantous. And this actually in us actually connects to the umbilical cord. In other organisms, like in chickens, which have all of these as well, the chicken embryo, the Elantous is where they store waste product. But in us, this actually becomes actually part of the urinary bladder and is the structural base for the umbilical cord. So base of umbilical cord. And actually it becomes part of the embryo, the structural part of the bladder. that is bladder. Let me move it up. So those are the 4 extraembryonic tissues: the amnion, the yolk sac, the chorion, and the elantous. So let's see if we have a picture of this. Okay, so this is a more developed embryo where we are starting to get the placenta. So we have the chorionic villi, which is part of the chorion. We have the yolk sac right here. This blue, that's the amnion. So that is the amniotic sac, and embryonic development is occurring in this aquatic environment. And then we have the base of the umbilical cord. I guess they don't have the elantous labeled in here, but it would make up the base of the umbilical cord and become part of the bladder.